Hi, guys, good evening, and welcome back to another episode of The Edward. I'm your host, Eddie, and in tonight's video, I am finally doing my episode recap and review for the series premiere of Zoo and the second episode, Fight or Flight. Now, before I proceed, I must warn you guys that these reviews for both episodes will be full of pretty big spoilers. So if you have not started watching Zoo yet and you want to, or if you're behind one episode, do not watch or listen to this video as I will be covering major and minor spoilers. So you have been warned. That being said, I like it so far. Excuse me. So far, so good. I really like it. It's fairly close. It's sticking fairly closely to the graphic novel, as I've told you guys before in previous videos, like in my reaction to the series trailer I did a while back. This is based off of the graphic novel by James Patterson, and it's a hell of a read. It's a lot of fun. There are a few things they haven't done yet, and I'm wondering if we'll eventually see them on the show, or maybe they'd be too difficult to do on the show. Either way, it'll be interesting to see how this first season pans out. So starting with the series premiere, the opening scene where we see the two guys who are just get out of a bar in LA, and they're taking a leak in an alley. They're just talking shit. One guy's urinating away, and then he hears a growling coming up from up above him. He slowly looks up, and then bam, the next shot is we see this big male lion looking directly at him, and the next thing he knows that it pounces on him, and as his friend turns at the sound of the attack, another male lion appears and attacks him. And that is loosely taken off of the opening scene of the graphic novel, which begins in the LA Zoo, where a male and female lion escape their enclosure, kill their zookeeper, and then they kill a nearby golfer, and then they descend onto a mountain view overlooking Los Angeles. And then our main character, Jackson Oz, who in the graphic novel is living in a shitty apartment in New York, sees the story on the news. Now, what's interesting about Jackson is that in the TV show, they've established that he has been living in Botswana, Africa for almost 12 years, and he helps his buddy Abraham run a safari tour guide business. In the graphic novel, Jackson Oz is a dropout, a college dropout, a university dropout, who was going to school, but he dropped out to investigate hyper-aggressive animal attacks that were happening all over the world. And he develops a theory, and this very well could translate into the show, and they may or may not use the same term, but he develops the theory of HAC. It's HAC, Human-Animal Conflict, is what it stands for. And he isn't really a scientist. He's just a college dropout who's working on the kind of like this conspiracy theory kind of thing. But in the show, he's been living in Botswana, Africa, and helping his friend Abraham run a safari tour guide business. And in the graphic novel, Jackson is friends with a guy named Abraham. And Abraham lives in Botswana, and he's the one who actually runs a safari tour guide business, and he calls Jackson for his help to help him find some missing tourists and locate his brother, who's been out of contact for several days in another camp. And what else is interesting is that in the show, they're already in Botswana, but then it cuts back to Los Angeles, where we meet another character, a girl who works for the LA Telegraph, I believe, and she is currently working on a story. She's the one who's really pursuing this story as to why these two lions escaped the LA Zoo and killed these two men in the city, and then they were eventually, both lions were put down and brought back to the zoo for study to examine their brains and their whatnot for sign of rabies or anything. She's following up on this story, and she is trying to connect it to a controversial chemical company which allegedly has put some kind of tainted the food supply, or at least the meat supply, for the lions and other big predators in the LA Zoo that the LA Parks and Recreation Department now authorizes the zoo to use, is this supposed tainted meat. and she's trying to make a connection. So she and the zoo pathologist, which is basically, he's the animal coroner, they're trying to they try to examine the bodies and figure out, you know, what's going on here with these lions. What made them what suddenly provoked them to escape their enclosure and kill people? You know, what made them do this? And they're trying to look for evidence of rabies or any kind of virus that might have caused them to suddenly, you know, snap like this. And in the meanwhile, the female reporter also points out how there are reports of a number of missing cats in the Brentwood area. All of these local pet cats have suddenly disappeared, gone missing, and she doesn't know where they are. And her editor wants her to originally drop the story because it's uninteresting. But more importantly, this journalist, this female reporter, is secretly also running a website, which is kind of like an online newspaper, so to speak, where she makes this website and she posts all of this stuff, mostly kind of like conspiracy theory related crap, but mostly about this chemical company that has supposedly done harm to multiple cities and multiple areas, and how they are ultimately responsible for these lions breaking out and killing the two men. And her editor tells her to drop it, but she refuses. So she and the pathologist try to figure out what's made these two lions attack and kill these two men and break out of the zoo. Meanwhile, back in Botswana, when Abraham can't contact his little brother who owns and operates another safari guide, he recruits Jackson's help to drive out there in the Jeep and see if they can find out what's happened at the camp. Completely deserted. No people, no sign of any activity. It's just completely gone. And then they go to the recreation area or the breakfast area, and they see that there's plates of food and drinks that were left in a hurry. Like somebody was eating breakfast and then they suddenly got up and just went away. They find a video camera, like a tourist video camera. They watch it. They play some of the footage. And we don't see what happens, but we can hear people screaming and lions roaring. And then the footage ends. Abraham and Jackson look at each other like, what the hell is going on? So they take the Jeep out and they follow the trail of the other Jeep that Abraham's brothers supposedly took the tourists out on. They find the Jeep. It looks deserted, and as he and Abraham step forward to investigate, you know, they're in this tall grass, so a lion could easily be, you know, kneeling down in the grass waiting to pounce and attack. So they both have their rifles out, you know, panning the area as they slowly approach this safari Jeep, and then this woman suddenly appears, this panicked French woman, our character, Chloe. Another character who also has been translated differently on the show rather than the graphic novel. Everything I've described to you in the show does happen in the graphic novel. Jackson and Abraham they are in Botswana, and they do investigate the deserted tourist camp, and they try to find the missing tourists and the tour guides and Abraham's brother. And they do encounter Chloe, this French woman, and in this case she's just a French woman who was on holiday. You know, she and her husband, or would-be husband, had prepaid for this honeymoon, this safari honeymoon, but they never got married because she found out that her husband had cheated on her. But because she already committed to this safari honeymoon, she came on holiday by herself, and she's the only survivor of an apparent unprovoked lion attack that killed everybody else in the tour party except her. She managed to escape, and that's what she explains to Jackson. And right before she can explain any of that, you know, she's panicking and telling him they have to go. Abraham is inside the Jeep, and he sees a body, but a lion follows him in there, and Jackson tries to scream out, "Abraham!" And we hear several gunshots, and we presume that Abraham is dead because the lion then reappears with fresh blood around its mouth. And Jackson realizes his friend is probably dead, so he and Chloe make a run for their Jeep, for the Jeep that Jackson and Abraham had come in, and the lion chases them, jumps on the hood, roars and claws at the windshield. Chloe's screaming, and Jackson's having a hard time starting up the Jeep. of course, it has trouble starting up, but he eventually gets it going. They escape, and that's when Chloe explains to him who she is and all the stuff that I just covered about her coming on this trip alone. In the graphic novel, when he rescues her, she is actually a scientist who is with a research party who are investigating bizarre, unexplained bird migration patterns that were happening that were not supposed to be happening until later in a certain time of the year. They were down there investigating these bird migration patterns when she and her research party are attacked by lions. And what's interesting is that the lions that do attack them are all males. It's not a typical pride where it's usually one or at least two males and multiple lionesses, but all male lions attack the tour guide party. And that's how it happens in the graphic novel, and that's how it happens in this first episode of the show. So they're sticking pretty true to that. But in this case, Chloe is not a scientist, and I will get back to that later in the other episode review. But so she and Jackson eventually make it back to the camp. They manage to reestablish some radio contact to call for help, explaining that there's been some kind of slaughter or massacre at this camp, and there are multiple missing people, and Abraham is one of them. And they're still under the impression Abraham is dead. The authorities show up, but they arrest Jackson because earlier in the episode, before everything starts to go to hell, Jackson and Abraham are on one of their standard safari guides with a jeep full of tourists. And while they stop to admire a rhinoceros or a zebra, I believe. I'm trying to remember. It was a while ago when I watched it. This Jeep pulls up, and at first you think, uh-oh, poachers. What are they going to do? So Abraham and Jackson blast their radio music, and the music scares away the animal, but it pisses off the hunters. And it turns out they're not poachers, but they're actually legal hunters. Like, these guys had a legal right to hunt certain animals in this area. But Jackson and Abraham make a case that they are on wildlife sanctuary land and the hunting land is way over there. So these guys are actually trespassing. And the main guy, this rich Asian guy, gives them a dirty look and is like, "We'll be back" kind of look. So later, cut towards the end of the first episode, when the authorities show up to rescue Jackson and Chloe, they arrest Jackson for interfering with a lawful hunt. And there's the rich Asian guy smirking at him like, heh, 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 heh. But Jackson's trying to convince them, "You don't understand, there's a problem here. There are lions all over the place. My friend is dead. All these people are missing." And of course they won't listen to him. But he and Chloe are taken away, but to safety. Back in LA, Mitch, the name of the zoo pathologist, and the journalist, the girl, they're currently in Brentwood, and they're investigating all of these missing cats, wondering if this chemical company that the girl believes is responsible for the unprovoked lion attacks and escape are somehow responsible for all of these missing cats. And they track them to this local elementary school, and all of them have gathered in this enormous tree. Like 50 to 100 cats are all sitting on branches, meowing, purring, and just hanging out on tree branches. They're all gathered in this tree, and it looks scary as hell. And Mitch notes how the girl notes this is an elementary school, and then Mitch points out, yeah, but during the summertime, this is a day camp. So the subtext there is that these cats could be waiting for all of the children to arrive the following morning. Because this is all at night, by the way. The subtext is that the cats, he's implying the cats might be waiting for all the kids to arrive. And so that's what, causes alarm. And finally, the last scene we see is that the two male lions have dragged away Abraham's body and placed it in a tree on a branch. And it's as if they're protecting their kill. And you're like, oh, poor Abraham. And this is the first episode. He's dead already? But in the trailer, as we saw for the series trailer, it's like, wait a minute. He doesn't die yet. He's got to be alive. Yep, sure enough, he's alive. Just, wounded, bleeding, but he's alive. Because we see his eyes kind of twitch and flutter. He's like, ugh, because he's hanging over a branch like this. And the two lions are guarding their prey. Not necessarily their kill, because he's still alive, but... And then... That's how the episode ends. Oh, before I forget, interesting note. When Jackson and Chloe are trying to get back to the camp, the engine dies, of course, so they're forced to continue on foot, which is like less than a mile back to the camp by that point. But they're ambushed by a male lion, and he chases them towards the edge of a ridge, and down below into the ridge is a river. And before they both jump and start rolling down the hill, because this lion keeps approaching them, Jackson notices how one of the lion's eyes, his pupil, is dilated. And it makes him think about something that he remembers from his father's recordings. Because in the show, instead of Jackson being the one who comes off as the paranoid animals are going to take over the world type of scientist, in the show, his dead father, whose recordings he watches on his laptop from time to time, his father talks about the theory, and this is what he explains to Chloe later in the show. His father explained how he explains how his father had a theory that once animals start to go batshit crazy, one of their eyes will have a dilated pupil, and that'll be the physical indicator, evidence that animals have suddenly turned or snapped, and Jackson's father indicates in his opinion that means that animals are no longer afraid of humans, because in all of his internet and in all of his videos that Jackson watches of his dad that he filmed himself saying, you know, his dad says, what if animals suddenly decided they weren't afraid anymore? You know, man has dominated this planet for so many years. What if the animals decide to take it back? And I'll bring that up later in the second part of this review. But yeah, I really like the series premiere, and it was quite good. All right, so quickly moving on to the second episode, immediately picking up where we left off. Mitch, back in LA, going back to LA now, Mitch and the journalist are both considering, well, what do we do about all these cats in the tree? What the hell are we supposed to do? And Mitch is like, well, we could try calling animal control, letting them know we found all of these missing cats, and they're not really missing, they're just all collected together. And right as they make a call to animal control, the cats, as if knowing that's what the humans are doing because they see them on the phone and hear them talking on a cell phone, the cats immediately retreat from the tree. They all hop down, jump down, and the cats just take off. They all disperse, just running past the two humans. And they both look at each other like, what the hell? Did they know we were contacting the authorities? Why did they suddenly leave? What made them run off like that? And then, cut back to Botswana. Jackson convinces the local chief of police to finally let him out of the prison cell. And the chief, who clearly has other bigger fish to fry, lets him out saying, you know, like, you think your camp was the only one attacked or had something happen to it today? There are multiple reports of all these missing tourist camps all over the territory. And we've got a lot on our hands. And then Jackson convinces him to go back out to the camp that he and Abraham were originally investigating so they can retrieve Abraham's body. So the chief agrees. He, Jackson, and one other police officer drive out there in the Jeep. They get to the Jeep where Abraham was presumably killed. He's not there. They look inside. His body isn't there. There is a body in there, but it's the body of the driver. And they get in there, and then Jackson notices that there's a trail that leads away from the abandoned Jeep, and he surmises that the lions dragged off their kill to eat later. And he's doing this under the assumption that Abraham is dead. Meanwhile, cut back to Slovenia, there is a British couple who's on holiday, only kind of on holiday and part adoption. They're currently taking care of this boy, this Slovenian boy, who hardly speaks any English, but they're in the process of adopting him, so they're bonding with him, spending time with him, getting to know him, and they have to spend a few more days with him before they can sign the adoption papers. And in the hotel they're staying at, there's this cute little terrier dog who, you know, the boy takes a liking to, but the dog has a bad habit of stealing the boy's toy from him. So, you know, the dad is always, the British adoptive father has to get it back from him from time to time. But the hotel clerk says, oh, the dog's harmless, he's fine. And so the young couple are trying to, you know, who are trying to communicate with the boy, what do you want to do today, huh? What do you want to do today? What's fun for you? And the boy picks up a pamphlet advertising the local circus. And so the man's like, okay, you want to go to the circus? Let's go to the circus. And the mother agrees. She's like, yeah, that'll be fun. And the boy looks excited. Cuts back to Los Angeles, Mitch and the journalist regroup at the zoo, and she says, well, you wouldn't believe how annoyed and angry animal control was with me when they found out I had called them out there for no reason. All the cats were gone by the time they made it there. And then Mitch tells her, yeah, the lion, he says, yeah, well, let's continue to look at the bodies of the lions. But then another zookeeper comes up to him and he asks her, hey, is it all right if we look at the lion carcasses again? But the other zookeeper says, no, they're gone. What do you mean they're gone? Oh, well, somebody came last night and took them. So somebody came in and retrieved the bodies of the 2 lions that had escaped the zoo in the first episode. And this makes Mitch and the girl look at each other like, what is going on here? And they start to, that's when they really start to theorize the possibility that this is a much bigger problem than they both anticipated. Cut back to Botswana. Jackson, the police chief, and the cop eventually follow the trail to a tree, and then before they get any closer, using their binoculars, they see Abraham's body dangling there in the branches, but they can't tell if he's alive or not. And there's no sign of any of the lions. There's no lions to be seen. So they drive up, and in fact, they drive the Jeep all the way up to the bottom of the tree, and while the one police officer with a flashlight and a rifle scans the area, the police chief and Jackson get Abraham down, and they realize that he's alive, just wounded and bleeding. And the cop begins yelling them to, hurry, 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 there are lions everywhere, there are lions. And sure enough, encircling them is a group of all male lions, probably the same ones that killed Abraham's brothers group in that original tourist Jeep that they found abandoned. And so they quickly get Abraham out of the tree and into the Jeep, and all 4 of them just barely get away as the lions kind of watch in satisfaction almost as their intended prey victims get away. And so they get back to the hospital. Well, they get back to the hospital, and they return to Abraham and Jackson's camp, their safari camp where they operate and work. And there's a female doctor there. There's an American female doctor there who's looking at all of the bodies that were now placed into body bags. And these were all the victims of the abandoned, the deserted, attacked safari camp that Abraham and Jackson originally went to investigate. These are all the dead people. And she's looking over all the bodies, and and they're definitely all lion attack victims. But, there's just something not quite right about it. And it turns out that she is Jackson's mom. He refers to her as mom. So he and his mother have both been living in Botswana for the past 12 years. Not just Jackson, but he and his mom. I'll get back to that later. Now going back to Slovenia, we're back in Slovenia, and the British couple and their adopted son are watching the circus, and it's this act where the ringleader is getting the tigers to do tricks, and the woman comments how it's so unnatural to get animals to do something that doesn't come naturally or normal to them, like this seems kind of wrong. But the husband kind of shrugs her off and says, look, he's having a great time, look how much fun he's having, because they're trying to bond with their new adopted son. And the boy loves it, the crowd loves it, the tigers are acting as they should when they're in the circus ring. And I kept thinking to myself, oh, this is going to be bad, something's going to make them snap, and they're all going to turn and kill their ringleader in front of this audience. But that doesn't happen. Later, after the show, the boy carelessly wanders away because he wants to keep looking at the tigers. He wanders outside of the tent, sees the tigers, who are safely secured in a cage behind a perimeter fence, so the boy can't get that close to him, but he's getting dangerously close. But fortunately, his adopted father intercepts him in the nick of time before he can get any closer to the cage full of tigers. And right before they leave, the boy starts pointing and saying in his native language, and there's a clown who's handing out stuffed animals, and sure enough, the boy selects a stuffed tiger, and that's his little souvenir. So then the family leaves the circus. No incident, no problem, right? Cuts back to Botswana. Dr. Oz, that's what I'm calling her because I don't remember her first name, but Jackson's mom is asking him for confirmation what happened to all these people. And he says, well, Abraham and I went out to Abraham's brother's camp, and we found it deserted, abandoned, no sign of anybody. But as you can see from all these bodies, all these people were killed by lions. And she tells him that we've been living out here for so many years, and I've seen what a mauled body looks like from a lion attack, but this isn't. These bodies don't indicate a typical lion attack. And then she goes on to explain how lions, naturally will go for the throat or the neck when they ambush their prey. But the way she phrases it, like she said in the trailer, these people were just murdered. They weren't killed to be eaten as food. They were just flat out killed. And so, and that later, correlates, sorry, I don't know if that's a word, but that fits in with what Abraham was saying when he was lying in his bed and recovering from his wounds to Jackson. I mean, obviously he was thanking him for coming back for him and saving his life, but Abraham now believes that the lions intentionally injured him but took him alive on purpose, because they didn't want to kill him just yet, because he thought he was done for, because it shows a flashback where he jumps in the Jeep, but the lion follows behind him, and he spins around to see it just too late, and the lion knocks him down with his paw, and he says to Jackson, I thought I was going to die, so I made my peace right there, but the lion just grabs me by the foot and drags away, and then they dragged me up into the tree where you found me, and I can't remember anything up until that point. And he's like, I think they kept me alive on purpose. And Jackson's like, are you suggesting that they attacked you for the sport of it or something? He's like, maybe. And so Abraham's quickly becoming convinced that there's something going on with the lions. And then later when Jackson and Jackson's mom is telling him, like, these people were killed for food. They were just killed for the hell of it, is what she's basically saying. And then she hates to admit it, but when she refers back to Jackson's father, and both her and Jackson always thought of him, like towards the end of his life at least, how he was this disgraced scientist who was asked to resign from his university, and they both moved away from Africa to get away from him because he was going crazy with all this paranoid, crazy animals are going to take over the world crap. And but when they're watching his videos later, and in the earlier episode, that's all quickly coming true. Animals are indeed starting to act more aggressive and more intelligent than they previously have before. And so she reveals to Jackson that the rest of your father's recordings are safely tucked away in Tokyo. So Jackson and Abraham both decide to make a trip to Tokyo to retrieve the rest of Jackson's father's recordings, while Jackson reluctantly leaves his mom behind in Botswana, because at first he doesn't want to leave her behind, saying, like, if there really is something going on with the lions, I don't want you here, I don't want this camp overrun and you be in the middle of it. But she's like, we've lived in Africa for so many years and nothing has happened to me. I'll be fine. So Jackson and Abraham, now that he's partially healed, depart for Tokyo. Cut back to Paris, France. Chloe has made it back home safe and sound. And it turns out she is an agent in the French Secret Service. Now, at first I thought, oh my God, she was undercover doing some digging around in Botswana to see if the animal attack theory was true or not. But it turns out that was not the case at all. She was really on her honeymoon safari. And it turns out this woman shows up to her office asking to see her, and it's her sister. But Chloe doesn't want to talk to her because Chloe then makes it very clear that it was the sister who slept with her former fiancé. And you can tell she is heartbroken. And the sister feels bad too, but poor Chloe is devastated. And she doesn't even want to speak to her own sister. So, that's kind of painful. But so that's the big reveal. Chloe in the show, in the graphic novel, she's a scientist, an animal scientist, but in the show, she is a French secret agent. So, cool. Okay. And towards the end of the episode, when she returns home, she's approached by a man who is also French Secret Service, but he doesn't specify which branch or what his name is. But he does refer to her trip in Botswana and what, she reported them, what she said about it, not in an official report, but she just told people at work about it. And he hints at her that it wasn't the only attack that happened or is happening. And it could, what's happening could threaten the security of the entire planet. She looks at him with extreme concern, like, uh-oh. And then finally, the final scene, back in Slovenia, The husband and the British couple have finally officially adopted their little boy, and he's growing quite close to them. Unfortunately, the dog that resides at the hotel they're staying at, the little terrier, has stolen the boy's stuffed tiger. So the father has to go after the dog. And he tells his wife and his son, "I'll just stay here in the hotel room. I'll go get it. It's nothing." And he follows the dog out of the hotel. And what's interesting is that the dog, it's almost as if it's leading him intentionally out of the hotel. But he seems to think nothing of it. He's like, "Come here, boy, come here." And he's like, "Ah, there you are." And he continues to follow him. Finally, it leads him to an alley. I'm not sure how far it is from the hotel, but it's clear that he's pretty far from the hotel. He finally finds the dog in an alley. He's like, "There you are, boy. Come on, give me the toy. Give me the toy." And the dog still has the stuffed toy in its mouth, and it starts growling at him. It's like, "What's wrong with you?" Excuse me. The British man is like, "Are you all right, boy? What's wrong with you? What's wrong?" And there's more growling heard, and the British man slowly turns, and there's another dog, a different breed, a bigger dog. He looks a little confused at first, but he looks back at the terrier. But the terrier has been joined by 3 other larger dogs of different breeds. Pretty soon, he realizes that he has entered their kill zone, because to his horror, he realizes that there are mauled bodies all over the place in this alley. People that the dogs have lured to this spot and killed them. And so the man realizes he's been intentionally lured into a trap by this cute little terrier, and the rest of the dogs were waiting to ambush him. And before we see what can go down, cuts to commercial. And the final scene is the little terrier returns to the hotel room where the wife and the boy are staying, and returns the stuffed tiger toy to the boy. And the woman looks confused as like, "Oh, well, there's the dog, but where's my husband?" And she's wondering where he is. And we don't see what happened to him or what has happened to him. So overall, I'm really excited as to where this show is headed so far. The first 2 episodes were great. I have yet to watch the 3rd episode, but overall, cool. I like the pace that it's at, because like the graphic novel, it slowly builds up to when it starts to get really good and really exciting towards the middle of the story. So I bet you towards the middle of the first season, things are going to start to really, really escalate, just get intensify more and more and more. So far, so good. So thank you, CBS. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching this review. I'm sorry it was much longer than my other videos, but I was covering 2 episodes here. So thank you for your time and for watching this. I hope you are enjoying Zoo as much as I am. And now that I am up to date, I will be doing a recap and review of episode 3. So please stay tuned for that, as well as my recap and reaction videos regarding the first 2 or 3 episodes of the Scream TV series. And thank you so much for watching and tuning in. Please hit subscribe, like, and comment and share on this video. Leave your thoughts and opinions down below. Did I miss over or gloss over anything? Was there certain scenes or characters that you like in the show so far? What do you like about the show? What do you hope to see? What's an animal that you'd like to see explored as becoming an increasing threat and a danger to mankind? Shout out down below. Well, thank you so much for watching, guys. And like I said, stay tuned for Zoo as it continues to air on CBS Tuesday nights. And of course, until next time, may the Force be with you.